we've talked about some things already that you should know. Like, what would this be considered to be? A line, okay. What would this be? If I just put a dot here and a dot here, be a line segment, okay? So, and we've talked about how to name these and label them and all that kind of stuff. What we're going to do, and I think we've talked about this. I'm pretty sure we have. What would that be?
No idea.
I think we've talked about this, haven't we? No, we haven't. That's the first thing. I thought we talked about this, but this is the first thing on this lesson. All right, so let's talk about this. So we've got a line. We got a line segment. Oh, a line. Tell me something about the ends. What happens? Keeps going forever in both directions. Tell me something about the ends here. They stop. Okay, and in fact, we give this a special name, don't we? Endpoints. Okay, good. Look at this one. This is kind of like a combination of the two, isn't it? Like one end, it keeps on going forever, and then one end's got an endpoint. All right. Anybody know what that's called without looking in the book? That's a good try. Segment line. I haven't heard that one before, but that's it's a good try. It's called array. All right. Did you say that? All right. It's called array. So watch. It has an endpoint. So it has. How many endpoints does array have, though? Just one. Okay, just one endpoint, and it keeps on going in a certain direction. Now, do you remember how we named this? If I call this A and B on here, how would I name this thing? Line AB, and so we put a AB next to each other, and what on top? Little line segment, or a little line with arrows on the end. Okay, remember that? And then, actually, let's not put the dot right there. Let's put right here and here. What if I said this is point C and point D? What would I call this? Line segment. Very good. Line segment CD. Everybody got that? Is that the only thing you could call it? I could call it what else? Line segment DC, or I could call this what? Line BA. All right? What we're going to do here is just learn how to label this thing. Let's say this is X, and let's put a point here, and we'll call that Y. All right? So we got to name this thing. Now right here, it didn't matter. I could have called this line AB, or I could have called it line BA. I could have called this line segment CD, or I could call it line segment DC. Now this one, it absolutely matters what order you put it in. What do you think? Which one do you think goes first? You think the Y goes first? The X does. The one with the endpoint actually goes first. Okay, so it's X and then Y, because it starts at X and it goes through Y. Do you see that? And look at our little symbol. Do you see how this keeps on going in one direction? Well, we're going to put a little line with just one arrow, and that arrow will always go to the right. It doesn't matter what your array looks like. I mean, I've had some people do this, and it's probably because I just didn't. Like if this was EF, I've had some people do this, EF, and then like that, because that's the direction of the ray. But you don't do that. What do? We always make the ray go in that direction. You okay with that? All right, so that's how we show a ray. Pretty simple, and it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? A line has two arrows. Line segment doesn't have any arrows. A ray just goes in one direction, so it's just going to have one arrow, and we just always write it to the right. We good with that? All right, that's easy. Let's get rid of this. And there's a reason why we're talking about array, because of what we're going to do right now. Watch, here's array. Right there, and here's another ray. And it's not just some random ray just stuck anywhere. What do you think they have in common here? Okay, yeah, we haven't said that word yet, but you're right, it is a vertex, but they have that endpoint in common, don't they? Do you see it? So both of these rays share a common endpoint. You may want to jot that down. I'm not going to write it down though. But both rays share a common endpoint. So that must be true to make what we're going to talk about right here. And that common endpoint, Kenny already said it, it's got a special name, and we call that a vertex. We'll be using that word vertex a lot throughout the course of the year. So that is a vertex. All right, it's where the two endpoints come together and they touch each other. Everybody got that? Now, what's this whole thing called, the two rays with a common, is called an angle, right? And you've seen these before, and I'm sure you've talked about angles in other classes. All right, so this whole thing is called an angle. Basically, what is an angle? It's two what? It's two, not just lines, two rays with a common what? Endpoint called a vertex. Everybody got that? So an angle is basically two rays with a common endpoint. So both endpoints are in the same place. Everybody got that? Let's talk about, let's do this. This part, this one ray, we give that a name and we call that a side of the angle. And of course that would be the other side of the angle. So we got a vertex, we got two sides. Everybody got that? Two sides and a vertex to an angle. Let's talk about how to name the angle. Let's go a different color here. Liven things up. Let's put a point right here and we'll call that B. We'll call this vertex A and we'll call this point right here C. Alright? What we're going to do is we're going to name this angle just like we name all the other stuff. We've named lines, right? We know the symbol for lines. We've named line segments. We did all that at the beginning. We're going to do the same thing with this. This is the symbol for an angle every single time. It's kind of like a crooked L. All right? That's the symbol for angle. Now, there are some things that have to be true about how you write an angle. Remember how we did a line? It could be AB or BA. It doesn't make any difference. On an angle, part of that is true, but then there's something else that must be true. Remember a ray? The first letter of a ray has to be the endpoint. Well, on an angle, the vertex has to go in the middle. We're going to use 3 points to name a ray. How many points do we use to name a, I should say an angle. How many points do we use to name a line? How many points? 1 or 2? Is it 1 or 2? It's just 2, isn't it? It's not 3. To name a line, you only use 2. You only use 2 points to name a line. What about a line segment? No, you can't use 1. It's not a point, though. If it's lowercase, it's not a point on the line. We can use 1 letter, like if you had a line like this, and this was line L, but that L is not a point on the line, though, is it? We could use 1 letter if they give it to us, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about actual points on the ray or the line, that kind of thing. So look at this. This ray, what would I call this ray or this side right here? It's a ray. No, just the ray itself. How many points do we use for a ray? We use 2 for a ray. What's always the first one? The end point, okay, the end point's always the first one. So this side right here would be what? Ray AB. What would this ray down here be? It would be AC, ray AC. But I'm talking about the angle. What would we call the angle? The vertex is always in the middle. We use 3 points for a vertex, or for an angle. I'm getting all mixed up. We use 3 points for an angle. So it would be B, A, C. The vertex always has to be in the middle. Jot that down so you don't forget. 3 points can name an angle. The vertex always has to be in the middle. What about the B and the C? Do you think it matters? No. If I said it only matters if the vertex is in the middle, the two, these other 2 points right here doesn't make any difference. So I could call this what else? CAB. Angle CAB. Doesn't matter which way I call this. Everybody with me? All right. Here's another way I could call this. If there's only 1 angle coming out of this vertex, I could just call it by that 1 letter. So I could call it just angle A, and sometimes that's really nice. All right? If there's only 1 angle, and I'll show you an example where there's more than 1 angle coming out of that vertex. Here's another way we could call this. Let's do a different color. What if I put a 1 right there, like in between the 2 sides? I could call this just, what do you think? Angle 1, right? I could call it just angle 1. Sometimes they'll name them by angles, and they always put them in between. It's not a point on the line, okay? It's not a point on the ray at all. It's just a number that's in between this right here. Now, this is how we kind of show what angle we're talking about. Sometimes we'll draw these things. See that little arc right there? Sometimes we'll do that to talk about this particular angle. All right, we're going to do a little bit more with those arcs a little bit later on. All right, so there's a lot of stuff you know now about the angle, about how to describe the angle. We could call it BAC, angle BAC, or angle CAB, or we could just call it angle A. Or if they put a 1 in there, they don't always put numbers in there, but every once in a while they will. And sometimes that's really nice. Sometimes it's a lot easier, to tell you the truth, if they put numbers in there. But if they don't, if all they have are points, then you're going to use that way, the way we did it. Let me show you a situation where we have two angles coming out of one vertex. All right, what if we had this? And we'll call this WX. We'll call this one Y. And we'll call this one Z. Now, how many angles are in this little picture right here? How many total angles are there? There's actually 3, aren't there? A lot of people say 2 because they're looking at this one and this one right here. But there's actually the whole big one, right? So there's actually 3 of them. There's 1 here, there's 2 here, and then the whole angle would be 3. Because they all have a common vertex, right? We're good to go. So watch this. What if I wanted to name... Let's put a 1 right here and a 2 right here. And I'm going to put a big old arc. I'm going to put a 3. So the whole big angle is angle 3. This one up above is angle 1. This one down below is angle 2. What's another way I could name angle 1? So I could say angle 1. What has to... Yeah, the vertex always has to be in the middle, right? So the vertex always has to be in the middle, so I could call it WXY. So we put an angle symbol, always put an angle symbol in front of it, WXY. We can only name an angle basically 3 ways. One with a number, one with 3 letters, and another way with just 1 letter. Could I call this angle 1 right here? Could I just call it angle X? Why not? Yeah, because I don't know which one I'm talking about. If I just said, okay, look at angle X, how do I know which one I'm talking about? I don't know if I'm talking about this angle 1, I don't know if I'm talking about 2, or I don't know if I'm talking about the whole thing, do I? Remember what I said earlier? If there's more than 1 angle coming out of that vertex, you have to use the 3 letters. Okay? So we can't just call it angle X, but we could call it WXY, or we could call it YXW. I'm not going to write that, but you could go in that order. What always has to be in the middle, though? The vertex. Okay, or I could call it angle 1. Let's talk about angle 2. What else could I call angle 2? YXZ. Good. Angle YXZ, or ZXY. What about angle 3? We could call it angle 3, or what is it? Z. Right. WXZ. Very good. Angle WXZ. Starts to look like alphabet soup here after a while, doesn't it, with all those letters? But you got to keep straight. So when you're talking about certain angles, make sure that you understand what they're talking about. Now, if they said ZXW, it's the same angle, isn't it, as WXZ? Sometimes in the book, well, when I read them off, okay, because you're not doing problems right now from the book, but when I read off the answers to these worksheets, I might say, okay, the answer is, it'll say, give me another name for angle 1. And I might say WXY, but you might have written down what? YXW. Does that mean you're wrong? No, not at all. So sometimes you're going to have to look. When I read off an answer, you might have something that's a little bit different than I say, but you have to determine. I'm not going to give you every situation, every possible situation, okay? You have to figure out if it's right or not. I'll give you one answer, and there may be 2 or 3 different ways to write that answer, and all 2 or 3 ways could be right. So you just have to understand that. That's a little bit. That's where it gets a little bit tougher than in algebra. Usually in algebra, there's just one answer and that's it, right? On this, there's one answer, but you might be able to write it 2 or 3 different ways. So you got to be careful. Okay, thanks. All right, are we good with that? All right, I think we covered that pretty well. Let's stop this and we'll go to another